Hi there and welcome to our panel on fake news and other problematic information. We have 5 papers in this panel. The first of these looks broadly at the distribution of problematic content on Facebook between 2016 and 2021. We then move on to look at specific outlets. The first of these is the Russian propaganda outlet RT, and we're looking there at how its content is distributed across language communities on Facebook. The second is Sky News Australia, a commercial outlet that is now also becoming very popular in the US and elsewhere. Beyond this, we're shifting our interest to discourse around the term fake news. So we're looking first at how Australian politicians attack and criticize the media on Twitter using the term fake news, and second, how the term fake news is being deployed in Russian and Persian tweets. So let's jump right in.
Welcome to this talk, Fake News on Facebook, a large-scale longitudinal study of problematic link sharing practices from 2016 to 2021. I'm Daniel Angus, and I'm presenting this research on behalf of the team, which includes Axel Bruns, Edward Hurcombe, and Stephen Harrington. This project moves beyond problematic definitions of fake news to understand dissemination of generally problematic information across social media at scale. We're zooming in here on Facebook and specifically looking at dynamics of content sharing on the Facebook platform around key events and specifically looking at domains and link sharing practices. The data that we've generated comes from the Fake Nicks list, which is a list of problematic domains that are an amalgam from various papers and studies of mis and disinformation. We're using the CrowdTangle platform then to gather posts between 2016 to 2021 that include links to these known problematic websites. Limitations of this is that we're only looking at public pages, groups and verified profiles, and those that are indexed on the CrowdTangle platform. The volume of data is fairly immense. We're talking in the range of millions upon millions of posts. We can see here also the effect that certain world events have on the volume of data that we've been collecting from these kinds of known problematic link sharing practices. We're using network analysis to look at this and discover patterns in the data we've collected. This is an example of one of the networks that we're looking at, which is a space domain network. So these are Facebook entities, so those pages, groups, and profiles, how they are linking then to known problematic domains. When we use the tool Gephi to plot this out, we note that there are certain clusterings around known social groupings, US conservatives, progressives, alternative health, UK and other kinds of language groups and countries as well, and generally conspiracy theories in the middle. We're also looking at other kinds of sharing practices, and this is Facebook pages or entities, such as groups, sharing other Facebook entities. So this kind of space-to-space network gives us an idea about how there are interlinkages happening within the Facebook ecosystem. What you're seeing here is a community detection to locate these kinds of communities that are sharing each other's content. We note here, looking at the descriptions of these groups, one's focusing around conservative American politics, those more around progressive American politics, those around health and other kinds of alt lifestyle behaviors, anti-vaccination groups, those kinds of things, and also those from other countries, in this case, India here, with a lot of pro-Modi content. Where we're going with this is generally looking at activity further through thematic actions and activities and changes over time. And then, of course, trying to lift those limitations and see how far we can take this data.
Good day, everyone. My name is Sofya Glazunova, and on behalf of the 5 researchers from the Digital Media Research Centre at the Queensland University of Technology, Australia, I would like to present our project on digital multilingual audiences of Russian media outlet RT on Facebook. RT, formerly known as Russia Today, is a state-owned media outlet which is funded by Russian taxpayers. It has multi-million audiences across more than 100 countries. It is known for the wide dissemination of strategic Kremlin narratives, but also problematic content such as conspiracy theories, Islamophobia, and other mis and disinformation. It is considered as a soft power tool that helps to strengthen Russian geopolitical image in the global arena. This media outlet also target audiences with so-called counterflow remit, or audiences that tend to oppose themselves to hegemonic actors, mostly from the West. Most of the previous research on RT concentrates on its content rather than its audiences. English and Spanish content emit in other languages, as well as terrestrial broadcast versions of RT and not online platforms that recently gained prominence in dissemination of RT content. Therefore, we aimed at exploring how audiences engage with RT across different languages on one of the most popular social media platforms, such as Facebook. We did so by assembling a multilingual research team that employs network and content analysis to analyze these patterns across Facebook spaces. And by Facebook spaces, we mean public pages, profiles, and groups that share RT content. We use an interactive tool from Facebook, CrowdTangle, to collect the data and analyze it further. In our next step, we will explore manually the description of this space and also RT articles that they share. Our preliminary findings show that such communities are usually formed around shared languages. As you can see on this slide and the network map that we created, these are French, Arabic, English, Russian, German, and Spanish languages. We saw the considerable ideological difference across them. German cluster, for example, shared far-right perspectives and conspiracy theories. Spanish cluster was marked by left-wing ideological perspectives, and Russian cluster was dominated by paramilitary and patriotic groups. However, what was in common between them that they vividly articulated their juxtaposition to different institutions, be it domestic or international governments and political actors, mainstream media, religions, or ethnicities. For our further analysis, we plan to investigate the nature of these communities using content analysis method. We thank you for your attention and looking forward to your questions and suggestions.
In recent years, the conservative news channel Sky News Australia has pivoted to publishing online content that speaks both to conservative and right-wing audiences in Australia, as well as internationally. This paper investigates the global reach of Sky News' digital content. Using the Digital Method Initiative's YouTube data tools, we identified 20,000 Sky News Australia videos posted on YouTube in 2020 and early 2021. We have also systematically queried the social media data access platform CrowdTangle from 1 April 2020 to 31 March 2021 to find posts containing links to these YouTube videos and posts containing native Facebook videos from the Sky News Australia page. We have then conducted a pairwise comparison of YouTube video descriptions and Facebook video messages to identify correspondence between videos. From these datasets, we have created a network of sharing patterns of Sky News videos. This network has two types of nodes: Facebook pages, groups, and verified profiles, and videos. Edges represent these spaces sharing videos. The Sky News Australia page has been removed to stop clustering around this page, and nodes have been sized by weighted degree. Zoomed in, we can see some of the spaces that have shared the most Sky News Australia videos, including Sky News Journal's Peter Credlin and right-wing groups such as Stand Up for Australia, Against Political Correctness, and Infidel Brotherhood of Australia. Analysis shows a clear global reach for Sky News Australia, particularly into the US. Light blue nodes, primarily on the left, represent Australian spaces, while light green nodes represent those from the US. There is a collection of other countries in the middle, such as UK and Canada. American spaces are the largest grouping, making up over 40% of nodes. We have also conducted a topic analysis of video descriptions. We found Australian topics, such as the country's response to coronavirus, international topics, such as videos critiquing the policies of the Chinese government, and American topics, such as the 2020 US presidential election. In this network, videos with prominent Australian topics are coloured light green and American light blue. The network aligns closely with the one before. We therefore find three unique spaces sharing Sky News Australia content. On the left, a small number of Australian spaces, including official Sky News affiliated pages, share many videos, predominantly from Facebook with mostly Australian themes. On the right, a large number of spaces, mostly public groups related to US politics, share a smaller number of videos, predominantly from YouTube with mostly American themes. In the middle, a diverse range of spaces, including public groups and public pages promoting conspiracy theories and COVID-19 misinformation, share videos from both YouTube and Facebook with international and other themes. Sky News Australia has developed a digital strategy to push conservative and at times conspiratorial ideas primarily into the US and Australia. This has given it significant digital growth. It also allows it to shape the discourse in both of these countries, becoming the Australian equivalent of RT or Fox News. Further research is required to understand how this spread operates. We'd like to make some acknowledgements for this project. Thank you all very much.
Hi everyone, in this paper we will longitudinally analyse how Australian politicians engage with and attack journalists and the media more generally on Twitter between 2011 and 2018. In doing this, the article responds to two gaps in the existing literature. First, most work focuses on actual examples or what Egelhofer and Lechler describe as genres of fake news. Second, where studies have analysed fake news discourse, they've tended to focus on the American case using a short time frame and taken a narrow approach that just assesses fake news discourse, ignoring wider kinds of attacks such as bias and so on and so forth. This has led to two research questions. How do Australian politicians engage with, attack and criticise the media, and how has this changed over time? To answer these questions, we're going to be looking or using longitudinal content analysis of the Australian politicians' tweets. First of all, the dominant form of engagement with journalists and the media on Twitter can be summarised as broadly respectful, functional, and at times even convivial, friendly banter. Journalists engaged across the spectrum, but focused particularly on national media and the ABC specifically. Second, it found that the use of fake news discourse is relatively limited and largely propagated by a small group of often populist, backbench liberal and far-right Pauline Hanson One Nation politicians, and not by the prime ministers in the sample, which is Scott Morrison, Malcolm Turnbull and Tony Abbott, and other political leaders. Third, while politicians have largely not adopted a discourse of fake news, there is a correlation between Trump's election in 2016 and significant increases in other forms of attacks and criticisms of the media, particularly allegations of bias and criticism of production standards. This is dominated by the same hard-right politicians, but there is a discernible, if small, increase in criticism and attacks more generally. Though often this is meta-journalistic discourse, as Carlson describes it. These attacks are generally focused on the ABC, and particularly its political coverage and a perceived urban bias. Conversely, Rupert Murdoch's News Corp, whose mastheads account for about 70% of the print circulation, alongside Sky News, Foxtel, and news.com.au, was rarely subjected to criticism and attack. This seems to speak to what former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd has described as a culture of fear about criticising News Corp. And you can just see in this this table here, again, the public service media in 2017 was receiving the vast majority of the different attacks and criticisms. And so in summary, shaped by national political systems and cultures, and perhaps Trump himself, it seems that the Australian case is in many ways very different from the US one. However, Trump's attacks on the media and coverage of this may have helped to normalise a more critical and confrontational tone between Australian politicians and the media, particularly, but not solely, amongst populists and the far right. Thank you.
In this paper, we investigate how ordinary Twitter users in non-democratic contexts use and employ fake news as a term, concept, and discourse. We primarily focus on the strategic use of this discourse rather than its taxonomy, and focus on two non-Western settings, namely Russian and Persian Twitter. We collected tweets in Russian and Persian posted within a month in 2020 that included fake news-related keywords such as disinformation, media lies, and propaganda. Starting from the network of retweets in each context, we identified the largest clusters in each network and qualitatively examined the tweets posted in each cluster. In the qualitative phase, we excluded tweets written in different languages from the sample. The Russian retweet network shows clear polarization tendencies between the pro- and anti-Kremlin clusters. While the pro-Kremlin cluster is relatively homogeneous, the anti-Kremlin cluster shows a range of domestic and international actors. Overall, our analysis shows a discursive struggle between the government and the opposition, in which the competing discourse strategically employ fake news discourses to attack each other. This is particularly pronounced in conversations about the poisoning of opposition activist Alexei Navalny and Belarusian presidential elections. The Persian retweet network also shows strong polarization between the pro- and anti-government communities. In the pro-regime cluster, the discourse of fake news is often employed to attack Western media, but the anti-government cluster consists of a range of discourses with different positions, goals, and topics of interest. All these subclusters strategically employ fake news discourses to discredit the Iranian government and its narrative. Our findings emphasize two important points. Firstly, and regarding fake news discourses, we saw that users in these contexts do not differentiate between the terms. Instead, they strategically employ them to discredit the antagonistic discourses, and in doing so, form alliances with other communities who share the same goals. Secondly, our findings challenge a monolithic understanding of the opposition in Russia and Iran. While traditional representations of the region often portray a dichotomous account of pro- and anti-government forces, we show that this is not necessarily the case. The opposition in these contexts is highly nuanced and is generally the result of a networked discursive alliance among a range of different voices sharing the same goal. We've been continuing the collection of this dataset and plan to expand this project to other platforms and contexts, and we look forward to your comments, suggestions, and questions in this regard. Thank you.